Hello and welcome to another episode of Finders Keepers, the podcast that helps you find the best keepers for your keeper and dynasty leagues. I'm your host Jordox, and round 18 of the AFL season, well, let's be honest, left a path of utter destruction in the fantasy world in terms of injuries and then suspensions. And the big one of the best players you could have in a keeper league is Nick Martin from Essendon, and he has unfortunately injured his knee seriously. It's an ACL, and he is now out for obviously the rest of this season. And it's such a bad time of year to do an injury like that because it could also be his 2026 season done as well. And as if things couldn't get any worse for Essendon, Will Setterfield is also out for the rest of the year with a foot injury. He's been pretty good this year. So he joins, obviously, Martin, and then you've got Parrish still out, Caldwell, who got injured last week. There's not much going on in that midfield, so there is opportunities, but it is bad news if you own either of those Bombers. And then, it just kept going. Took Miller with a hamstring, Tristan Sherry with a big suspension, which at this stage is 3 weeks. That's what they've handed to him. And then Connor Rozee in the final game broke his hand and is a test for this week, but you'd think he'd likely miss. And then, as if that wasn't enough, we found out on Monday afternoon that Jason Horne-Francis has a foot issue, a broken foot, and he's probably going to miss the rest of the season too. So I can't remember a round that has had so many big names in the fantasy world. I mean, this is hitting people in the classic game, but for keeper leagues, like some of these names, to lose them on the eve of finals is, it's painful, isn't it? But, crisis creates opportunity, and I'm sure there's going to be lots of names on this podcast that could fill a spot and could help you with your sides. So I'll go through what I noticed across round 18, apart from the obvious injuries. Then we'll have a look at the waiver picks for this week. It's getting harder and harder to pull them out. And then we'll finish with some questions from you, the listener. Got some good ones that have come my way this week. Looking forward to going through them towards the end of the pod. So round 18 did kick off Thursday night with Carlton taking on Brisbane. And it was really much of the same of what we've seen from the Blues in recent times. Brisbane got the win pretty easy in the end there. For Carlton, though, Lockie Cowan, talked about him last week, and I've really liked him when he's had the role and had the opportunity. He scored an 80, and that goes with an 80 score last week, and then there's an 80 from round 1. The rest is a bit of a mishmash of sub-affected injury games and the like. So, I like what I saw. I like watching him. I like how he takes the game on. And I said it last week, I say it again, Carlton just need to keep playing him in that spot and developing him. Tom De Koning was very much the second fiddle in the ruck setup again this week for Carlton behind Mark Pitternet. He did score a 79, which is pretty good considering, but I think owners right now would be a bit nervous about what the next 6 to 8 weeks looks like. But I'm still convinced he can be the best ruck, one of the best rucks in the game, whether it's at Carlton or if he does end up going over to St Kilda. The good thing about this next period, particularly if he can put up scores of 79, 70 plus, it's not ideal now if he's your number one ruck, but geez, if he picks up forward status for next year and then gets released as the solo ruck again, that could be a real blessing in disguise for TDK owners. For Brisbane, Darcy Wilmot is he's someone I've been watching a little bit lately because someone in my league has him. Could have maybe had a trade for him to bring him in. Haven't done so, but I like the look of him. I like watching him. And then to see him on the weekend put up a 144, it's an incredible score. 14 marks helped him. And he's probably someone that's maybe going to really reach their fantasy heights once Dane Zorko retires and there's a bit more space for him. But great for owners to see a ceiling score from him, a whopper too. Josh Dunkley, 137. Thank you very much. He's been he's been better lately, but he did have a pretty long stretch where he was quite underwhelming. And in this game, he ran with Paddy Cripps, and I don't know if it was a hard tag, but he ran with him and just dominated. I mean, he laid a lot of tackles to get that big score, but I think he had nearly 30 touches. And he won the inaugural Robert Walls Medal, which has been created to honour the memory of Robert Walls, who was a coach of Brisbane and Carlton. Coach Carlton too, actually. But, yeah, I always enjoyed his work in the media. And, yeah, that was quite sad to lose him this year. So it's nice that they've come up with the medal in that game. Last player, Hugh McGluggage. He copped the Chincotta tag, which did surprise me. I wondered if Chincotta would go to Zorko or Neil, but no, it went to McGluggage, and that makes sense. He's been at another level this year, but I guess just disappointing that he can still score these 60s every now and then, McGluggage. A hard tag, of course, but the thing that he's really elevated this year is that consistency of the higher scoring. Just need to see him stop dropping 60s every now and then. Actually, to be fair, that's the third time he scored a 60 this year. It's not as much as I would have thought. But look, I'm an owner, and it just can be frustrating because I've grown to rely on him. Friday night, this was such a great game. Gold Coast took on Collingwood. It was such a big night for Gold Coast. Really important that they get the win. And, when Collingwood kicked, I think, 0 goals 11 to start before they kicked one. And then Suns was 40 points ahead and Collingwood came back. It was very entertaining. And obviously the Suns held on, which is great for them. Big win for that club. Now, Matty Rowell, I talked about him last week and, gave him his credit. He's been scoring all these tons in a row. But I guess I questioned just what is his ceiling and is he really able to sustain this level of scoring? Because it does seem he needs to lay, 10, 11 tackles to get there. Well, this week he showed me his ceiling. He went up to a 140, massive score, another 13 tackles, kicked 2 goals, and I think around 28, 30 touches. And he's just, he's fantastic to watch. And now he's got the ceiling, and he's still such a rugged defensive player. He's never going to cop the tag. It'll always be Anderson. So Matt Rowell is looking good. Touk Miller copped a hamstring injury, went off on 33. And I guess I bring this up because the question is who takes his spot? In the game, Bailey Humphrey had a huge spike in CBAs, the most he'd had. And then the other one that popped in my head on the night was, well, do we finally see Sam Flanders back into the middle? That didn't really eventuate. And then the other one is Braden Fiorini, who's been just in the last few weeks having little bits and pieces of midfield time. So that's going to be a great watch this week for the Suns. Not that Miller's been a huge CBA guy this year, but yeah, just really interested to see if Flanders or Fiorini can go in there and pick up some of that, because that'll change their fortunes scoring wise. Although Fiorini's been scoring very well. For Collingwood, look, Josh Dacos, he is this week's Finders Keepers Player of the Week, and just purely for that last quarter, which was insane. So he scored 132, big game, big score. Amazingly, in quarters 2 and 3, I think he only scored a total of around 20 points. But yeah, it's that last quarter where they moved him into the centre, and he had, in a quarter, 16 touches, 2 goals and 1 point, 2 marks, 5 tackles, and scored 82 points in the last quarter. Now, shout out to Jaden Popowski, the stats man on X, who tweeted the record. So Dacos's 82 points is the second highest fantasy quarter going back to 2014 on record. Number 1 is 87 points by Nick Revolt in round 23, 2016 in the second quarter. And that was the day he scored over 200 revolt, which I remember well because I was against him in a Dream Team Grand Final, which I obviously lost. So incredible, Dacos. So, 82 points in a quarter is insane. What's really interesting, though, is it came after a move into the midfield. So as we know, Dacos has been doing a great job off half-back for the Pies this year, picked up defender status, it's been excellent. But he hasn't attended a centre bounce since round 11. And then on Friday night, when they were struggling against the Suns, they moved him into the centre bounces for the last quarter. So I guess the question now is, after seeing what he could do in a quarter, was it a once-off, or do Collingwood now really have to put him back into the midfield? It's an interesting watch because they're not exactly short of options in the midfield, Collingwood. And I'll talk about a few more of their midfielders in a moment, but I just think if Josh Dacos does go into the midfield a little bit more, does that then free up Dan Houston to start getting more of the pill? Anyone who's an owner of Houston would be, just very underwhelmed at his first season at Collingwood. And I think he's playing okay. It's just he's not scoring in the fantasy world. He looked good on Friday night. The first quarter, he had, I think, 35, 36 points to start and in the first quarter, and then just almost nothing from then on, and just scored a 60. So, I don't know. If Dacos goes in the middle, does that help Houston? Time will tell. The other mids I wanted to talk about at the Pies, Scott Pendlebury, they put him as a starting sub, which, shouldn't be a surprise. The guy is very much in the twilight of his career, but they just missed him and they had to bring him in at half time. So he came on second half. He scored 53 thanks to 17 touches in just 45% game time. What else can be said about Pendles? To be doing what he's doing at this age is incredible. And Collingwood, I think they've learned a lesson. Don't make him the sub because they still need him. Now, the other little mix I was interested in is Tom Mitchell. That was his second game back, and I thought he looked great, just like last week, scored a 91. But Ned Long had a dip in scoring. He scored 53. And I guess the question is, can they coexist in the same midfield? It's a bit like when I was cheering hard for Adelaide to put Sam Berry back in the middle, but Matt Crouch was there and Rory Laird was there. You can't have too many of the same type. And the way Mitchell's playing now, he's quite similar to Long. So I think they can. I just wonder if Ned Long, I don't know, I could just see him getting a rest at some point and maybe even losing his spot before finals for the Pies. Would be a shame, but I don't know. We'll wait and see. Just keep an eye on it if you're an owner of either player. Saturday Arvo footy saw a big clash in terms of the ladder and the knock-on effect, and it was the Bulldogs against my Crows, and it was fantastic to see my boys finally get a good away scalp, which we've been needing. And great for Crows, but Doggies, some question marks around their defence, I guess, has come out of the game. But onto the fantasy side of things, Marcus Bontempelli, a 166, just a simply ridiculous game and score from him. And he had a 65-point last quarter too. So if it wasn't for the exploits of Josh Dacos the night before, Bontempelli would have to be the player of the week. Look, the Crows just sort of let him go. They they definitely put Dawson on him. So Dawson and Bontempelli went head-to-head. And it was great to see, plenty of fantasy points. I can't see other sides letting Bont be that free, though. So, it was really interesting. The Crows sort of just said, Bont can do what he wants. We've got the rest of it covered. And as much as Bont did everything he could, it wasn't enough for the Dogs to win. Matt Kennedy, this was a bizarre score from him, a 30. From a full game, no injuries, or nothing that's reported at this stage. So he had 6 possessions for the whole game. This is the same guy I was talking about a few weeks ago as being the pick of the year across all formats. yeah, I can't explain it. I mean, the centre bounces, he was still there. They were slightly lower with Riley Garcia gaining a few, but I don't really know what to say other than he just had a really, really bad day, and I would be very surprised if we saw that again. For the Crows, Riley O'Brien, just a quick shout out to him with a big 126. And, you know, one of the biggest frustrations I've had with the big Rob Dog as a Crows fan is he doesn't take enough marks around the ground. And in this game, he took 8 marks for the first time since round 4, 2021. Yeah, he's in pretty good form, O'Brien, and, you know, his season average is at about 91, which is in line with the last 5 or 6 years. He's been very consistent. Dan Curtin bounced back from the quieter game last week and just continues to impress in so many facets of the game, and he is now the second favourite for the Rising Star behind Levi Ashcroft. But yeah, a 114 from Curtin. Huge numbers he's putting up. Really interested to see how much he can continue at this level. He dropped off last week, but his scoring has been, and just watching him every week, he appears to be getting better. And speaking of young players getting better and better, Riley Thilthorpe with a 122, thanks to a career-high 6 goals. Absolutely put on a show, and I thought it was pretty cool. It was, you know, against Sam Darcy. The Thilthorpe versus Darcy conversation is a very interesting one. I've seen a lot of Crows fans come out after the game tweeting and carrying on about how the media only ever talks about Darcy and what about Thilthorpe, and Thilthorpe's so much better than Darcy. I get it, and I love all the, you know, the cheering for your team and going into bat, but, you know, we don't have to compare them. We don't have to say who's better than the other. First of all, Thilthorpe's 2 years older than Darcy, so that has to be considered anyway. And secondly, like, who cares which one's best? We're watching 2 of the most exciting key position forwards develop and blossom right before our eyes. Don't worry about who's better. They're both incredible. And I may happen to have both of them in one of my keeper leagues, and it is very enjoyable. Giants and the Cats, I didn't take a lot out of this game. GWS continues their run over Geelong. They've beaten them, I reckon, 5 or 6 times in a row now. Yeah, nothing really stood out. I didn't watch the game, but even looking through the numbers, I think just Darcy Jones continues to impress me with his scoring. So he scored 81. 3 of his last 4 now have been over 80. And he's doing it with just a handful of centre bounces in each game. I really noticed him at the start of the year before he was scoring. And yeah, I can really see him developing into a very handy fantasy guy. Saturday night, Richmond Essendon. This was an interesting game. I thoroughly enjoyed it, even though the skill level was down, the scoring was down. In fact, I saw it was the lowest scoring total score game at the MCG since 1989, excluding the 2020 COVID shortened games year. But I was entertained. I thought it was fascinating, and you know, Richmond, great win. Yes, Essendon, you know, should have done a lot better with their kicking for goal, but Tigers did what they had to, and they've got 4 wins on the board now for the year, which is a huge effort for such a young side. Tim Taranto led the way with 132, and I've been critical of him this year. Just his second half drop-offs where, you know, he and Richmond are in games, and then second half he's nowhere near as involved. But this week he stood up very much, especially in the last quarter, kicked a great goal and was a huge reason why the Tigers won. Jack Ross scored 87, and he just continues to get centre bounce exposure in the last few weeks. And I reckon it's probably since McAuliffe went out with his injury. He laid a game-high 8 tackles, Ross, and he actually tagged Merritt in the second half. So with Ross, I've talked about him in the past, I've liked him in the past, and I've been very frustrated by him in the past. It's just really clear when he gets any sort of inside role, he scores. It's just when he's on the outside, he can score, but he can just go missing for large periods of the game. So, yeah, interesting to see what they do, Richmond. I wonder if he's in the middle just until McAuliffe's back, or if it's something that he can finally settle into as a permanent role, because that would make him very interesting. Jaden Short returned after, well, he had like a 1 week, 2 week injury that turned into 5 or 6 weeks. Anyway, he's back in his normal role, scored 109. Excellent for those owners who thought maybe the best of Short was behind him. But no, he looked great. And there were plenty of points for him and Banks. So Banks has taken his role since he went out, and this is their first game. I think their first game together with Banks also in that role. And he scored 93. But I noticed Floston had a 102. Even Tom Brown had a 99. So there was obviously plenty of tidy-up points for the Tigers in this game. But in saying that, if you're an owner of Sam Banks, you would have been slightly nervous about the return of Short. It's happened now, and both scored well. And lastly, just Taj Houghton, the long-awaited and much-anticipated debut for the young Tiger, and didn't he kick it off brilliantly with that mark and goal in the first quarter? Very exciting. And he ended up scoring 54 from just 56% time on ground. So, yeah, I think they've got one there, and if you've got him in your keeper side, you'd be very excited too. For the Bombers, I talked about at the top, the miserable injury news just continues. Nick Martin, Will Setterfield, their seasons are over. So I wanted to talk about, what does the midfield look like for Essendon now, moving forward? Elijah Sardis came in. I thought he looked pretty good at times. He just appears to run out of puff. He doesn't have the engine yet for a pure midfield role, but he scored 66 off very low time on ground, kicked a cool goal. But yeah, the Bombers, they've got Setterfield, Caldwell, Parrish, and obviously Nick Martin. They're just missing so many of their midfield. So I sort of put my eyes to next week to say, who's coming in and who's going to be in the midfield. The first thing I'll say, and look, I could be completely wrong, but I'd just be baffled if Dylan Shield wasn't recalled to the senior side. I get the idea of what's the point, play the kids, but they're kind of already playing all the kids. They debuted their 12th player on the weekend, 12th debutant for the year, that Smart, the forward. Dylan Shield in the VFL, it doesn't make sense to me when the entire midfield is gutted. So I reckon he comes in this week and plays midfield. Very handy. Grab him off your waiver wire if you can. I'll talk about that later, won't I? But just with the defender status, I reckon he could be very valuable. And then a couple other guys. Ben Hobbs had a good game. I wonder if they put him back in the midfield for a bit more exposure for him. He played a pure midfield role in the pre-season, and I thought he looked pretty good, but hasn't really been near it since. I did see he has some sort of groin complaint, so he might even miss this week as well, which is ridiculous. And then the other one's Archie Perkins, who was dropped last week. He can play midfield, maybe not pure mid, but he's another player that's too good to be in the VFL when they've got all these injuries. So Hobbs, Dylan Shield, Sardis, Perkins, and let's not forget about Sardell Hawley. And I know he's not a midfielder, but he's a winger, halfback type. He's in VFL. He's ready to go as well. So I reckon a lot of these names could be in this week, and they're all pretty relevant in the fantasy world, I reckon. The other Saturday night game was a huge clash in terms of the finals as well, with Fremantle and Hawthorn. And I thought the Hawks would win this, but Freo found a way in that last quarter and jumped back into the 8, which is good for them. Sam Switkowski came back after a few weeks out for the Dockers. He scored a 75, kicked 3 goals, and just offered them a real spark. And I think he's quite important for them. So they'll be hoping he stays fit for the run-in. For the Hawks, Lloyd Meek with back-to-back 130 plus scores for the big fella. He scored 136 in this game and laid 13 tackles, which is huge. A lot of big tackle numbers across the round. I reckon it was a very high tackling round. But yeah, Meek, I mean, he's really stepped up this year and continues to impress. Cam McKenzie was subbed out and, I don't know, could be set for another spell in the twos. Just the 28 points. Hawthorn's midfield is interesting. Probably the second week in a row they've been well beaten there. Warple was better this week in terms of his fantasy points. But yeah, if McKenzie goes out, Josh Ward's still there and I think he's doing okay. But Jai Newcomb was quiet. I don't know. I reckon Hawks just need another big mid in the off-season. But does Huswaite come back in? He's doing a really good job in the twos, but when they bring him in, they barely give him a run and then he's out again. So we'll see what they do this week. And the other player was Finn McGuinness, who was recalled to the side, but was the starting sub, which I think surprised a few. The fact that they brought him in maybe to do a tagging role, Sarong, Brayshaw, or probably more realistically it would have been Jordan Clark. I've seen a lot of commentary about how Hawks missed a trick by not putting McGuinness to Sarong or Brayshaw, but McGuinness hasn't attended a centre bounce all year, so it's not like he's been doing it recently. I reckon he could have gone to Jordan Clark and tried to clamp him because he was back to around his best after being well held last week. Onto the Sunday games, Melbourne and North Melbourne. These did what they had to do to get that win. Jake Melksham, though, I kind of keep trying to ignore this guy, but this is 3 weeks in a row now. 84 he scored with another 5-goal haul. So he's now kicked 14 goals in his last 3 games and has averaged 91 fantasy points in that time. What does any of that mean? I don't know, but we can't keep ignoring him. And he may get a mention in my waiver segment coming up shortly as well. Trent Rivers scored a 70, but he absolutely saved his score with a 35-point last quarter. And there's still no centre bounces for him. And it's been, 5-6 weeks of him not getting any midfield minutes, which, I may have said on a recent episode, but I don't understand it. They've got the halfback guys. They've got Salem, racking up. They've got Bowie, even Judd McVee. But what they don't have is a real point of difference in the middle. They just keep running with Petrarca, Viney, Oliver, and Cozzy Pickett. He's obviously a point of difference. But you know what I mean? There's no variety. It's just the same crew every week. And, I just wonder if Rivers, he trained in the preseason as a mid. I just don't know what's changed there. Tom McDonald came in as a late change for Stephen May. Came in and scored 79, took 11 marks. Pretty good, pretty like for May. So, May, I think May was ill, so he should return this week. Does McDonald go out? If not, keep an eye on him. I mean, he can score. He can play that role well. Harvey Langford, this was an impressive score. He scored 89. And when I saw this, I thought he must have had some pure midfield time. But no, he just played on the wing. Second highest score of his career, which is just this season, of course. But I think owners would be very excited at how he's developing. For North Melbourne, Jai Simpkin with another measly score, just a 67. And, he picked up the centre bounces last week when Davies Uniacke went down and Wardlaw was out. So I wondered if they'd persevere with Simpkin in the middle, and they didn't. He went back to his usual forward flank role, and he's just a real concern, Simpkin, because it's hard to see a future where he becomes really good again. They seem to just like him playing in that flank, and just feel like he's really old now. He's not. He's still young and should be putting out much better numbers than what he's doing. So we'll wait and see. I guess for owners, forward status should remain next year, but I don't know, with these scores, does that even matter? Cooper Harvey, the son of a gun. Talked about him last week, Boomer Harvey's son. And he was excellent again. Scored an 86 thanks to kicking 4 goals too. I think he got a few goals late in junk time. But, great score. And he looks like a player, doesn't he? And then lastly, Tristan Cherry. He had a dirty day. He was well beaten by Max Gawn, and has now been given a 3-week suspension for the errant arm that knocked out poor Tommy Sparrow. So, not a good day for the X-Man. Just scored 58 and will now be set for a 3-week holiday. Which does raise the question, for North Melbourne, who comes in for Cherry to ruck? They've got a bunch of guys that could take his spot. A lot of the guys they have, though, feel like more chop-out guys, not number one ruck guys. So you've got Jack Darling. He's the main backup to Cherry. It'd be very hard to see him rucking solo for a whole game. Finbar Maley could be the one. I like the look of him. He's the guy with that excellent moustache, and really impressed in that first game. And he could be the one. They've also got Callum Coleman-Jones, who they got from Richmond a while ago. We haven't seen much of him. But again, he's more of a chop-out ruck than a number one. And then probably the last... Well, they got Taylor Goad, but he's not ready yet. He's quite young. But then the other one is Bryn Teakle, who they got, I reckon, as a mid-season pickup, maybe last year. Anyway, he's got forward status. So, keep an eye on that. If they pull him in just for a few weeks to cover Cherry, he could be a nice 3-week play. But we'll learn more as the week rolls on. St Kilda Sydney did battle at Marvel on Sunday, and Sydney just won it in the end. That was a good game. Great last quarter. I just tuned in for the end of that one. And unfortunately for the Saints, just fell short. But Sydney, there's a slight flicker of hope for their season. For the Saints, it was Captain Jack turning back the clock, Jack Steele. And I call him Captain Jack, not only because he's the captain of the Saints, but I made him captain in my home league, and he helped me on my way to a very important win, thanks to 136 points after an 82-point first half that set him on his way for a season-high score. And, it was just usual Jack Steele stuff. Lots of tackles, very involved, great to see. Marcus Windhager is someone I've been pretty bullish on this year, and he put up a career-high score playing on the wing. So no centre bounces, no tagging, just playing on the wing and finding the footy. He scored 128. Very impressive. Now we finally saw Max Heath make a debut for St Kilda, the young ruckman who's been on the list for 4 years now. And bit of a concern for Rowan Marshall owners. I was concerned in round 1 when they played Boyd with him, and I just feel like they like the idea of Marshall playing forward, and that will be their goal long term, and that makes sense if they're trying to get Tom De Koning in. Anyway, Heath looked pretty good. I thought it was a pretty good debut. He scored 49, but I think I saw he gave away 5 free kicks, which doesn't help. But Ross Lyon spoke well about him after the game, so his chances of staying in the side are pretty good. Marshall was a terrible scoring game. He got his way to a 70, but it was looking terrible early. So the centre-bounce split between the two was 70-30, Marshall's way, and then the ruck contest around the ground was 64% to Marshall, 33% to Heath, and then 2% to Mitch Owens, who still likes to randomly attend every now and then. So what can we expect? Yeah, I reckon they will stick with Heath. I think they like having the two. I think they like the idea of Marshall forward. I don't think Marshall will score that poor every week, but there's got to be a knock to his ceiling now and his average from here to the end of the year. So wait and see. For the Swans, Matty Roberts put up an 80, much better score from him, but he's still playing predominantly on the wing. He hasn't taken a kick in since round 12. And, I don't know why. I thought he was looking good at halfback. But anyway, we'll wait and see what the Swans do there. And then lastly for them, just got to keep talking about Brodie Grundy, don't we? Until he stops putting up these scores, we're just going to have to talk about him every week. Another 126, if you don't mind. So that's now 9 tons in a row, and that's a 7-week average of 128. And that got me thinking, like, this level of scoring is, it's so surprising that he's doing it at this point of his career. But how does it compare to those huge years at Collingwood in 2018, 2019. So I tried to look at the data from there to grab a snapshot and see if he ever averaged more than 128 in a 7-week period. And I didn't even pull the calculator out. I just looked at his scores. Do yourself a favour, go back and look at his seasons, 2018, 2019. He was just scoring 150s on the reg. It was a 180. I think he went 180 a few times. Anyway, incredible. So he's not quite peak Brodie Grundy, but my goodness, what he is doing is something else this year. And guess who he plays this week? North Melbourne. So all those names I rattled off as the potential replacements for Cherry, one of them will be against Grundy this week. Good luck. And then the last game was Port Adelaide and West Coast, and West Coast were right in this. They were winning for a large portion of the game, but I guess kind of always thought Port would come back and get the win. There was so much in this game. It was great to watch. For Port, Joe Richards, I talked about him last week, about how much I like the way he plays and how he could be a really nice forward scorer for us. And then he drops a 123, huge score. Kicked 2 goals, 3, was just everywhere. And Lukosius was very quiet. I expect him to be better for the run. He's still rusty. But right now, Joe Richards, his stocks are rising rapidly. Manny Liddy got brought back into the side this week after being dropped the week before, which did surprise me. I didn't know. I didn't think he deserved that. But anyway, they brought him back in. He looks really solid on the wing. He scored 74. I think he's a smart player. I like the way he used it. He has this massive leg guard that he has to wear on one of his legs that makes him so easy to identify in the game, which is always good if you want to see, if you're tracking a player. But no, seriously, I think he looks pretty good. I reckon they have to just keep him in now. I see a role for him. He's a smart footballer, I think. For the Eagles, Harley Reid, first fantasy ton. What a great moment in what I reckon will be a long, successful fantasy career. Put up a 103, even with 6 frees against. He just can't stop giving away frees, this guy. And he was so dominant in that first half that they threw Willem Drew to him after halftime, which slowed him down. And he had some awesome clashes with Jason Horne-Francis, some real argy-barge. It just looked like the beginning of a rivalry that's probably going to last for the next decade. Two very similar, very hot-headed and immensely talented players. Harley Reid, Jason Horne-Francis. It was great to see. Tom McCarthy, he scored 72. It was a quieter game for him because he scored 72, but it was, he took 7 kick-ins, which really helped him get to the 72. Really interesting, they moved him into the midfield in the last quarter to try and get him more involved, and he attended a couple of centre bounces, and it was his highest scoring quarter of the game. Not really sure if that's something they continue with. It may have just been something on the night they wanted to do, but I think his place is in the back line. But yeah, I guess we'll see. West Coast will be continuing to experiment with, particularly with some players out. So the last player I'll talk about, Clay Hall, he put up a 73, but crucially was back at the centre bounces. They moved him out for most of the game last week, which I didn't understand. I've been big raps on Hall of what I've seen the last few weeks. But Jack Graham's out, suspended for 4 weeks, and Liam Ryan was out as well. And he has a bit of time in the centre as well. So with them out, Clay Hall was back in. Tom McCarthy had a go in the last quarter. I think they're going to mix and match, but if it were me, I'd be putting Clay Hall in there and keeping him there. And that was round 18. Oh my, I'm exhausted just going through all that. There were so many talking points, injuries, changes, opportunities. It's going to be a huge next month as we finish this season. But let's have a look at the waivers. My top waiver wire picks that I put out every week. And I like to start with the guys I put forward last week, see how they went, and what you should be doing with them if you did grab them. So last week, I only did 4. I'm just going to do 4 for the rest of the season because it's getting harder and harder to find these guys. And I think quality over quantity is important with these segments. So, the 4 from last week. Let's see how that quality stacks up. Bailey Scott, I put forward. I liked that he was back in the side. I've got high hopes for him if he can ever establish himself again, particularly at a distributing role. And he was the starting sub, which, look, it's not surprising. They've put him as a sub before, North, but this year, I just thought after the game the week before he'd, get more of a go. But he didn't, and his ownership numbers actually dropped from last week. So I reckon few would have grabbed him, seen he was the sub, and then said, nah, I'm not interested in that. Another one that I put up was Lockie Cowan for Carlton. He was at 35% ownership last week. He's up to 45, so it's a decent jump, but still very low owned. He scored an 80. I'm big on him. I spoke about him earlier. I think if he's available, which he is in 55% of keeper and dynasty leagues, I'd be grabbing him. Max Hall was another one I put up. He was at 64% this time last week. He's now up to 81% owned. No surprises there after the 120 he put up last week. Now this week he scored 73, obviously much lower, but I love him. I think he kicked a couple of goals that, were really important in the context of the game. And 73 is still a very good score. I think if you grabbed him last week, you'd be very pleased with that. And then the last one was Jack Lukosius. And he would have been disappointing for anyone who grabbed him. Just put up 37 points. I don't think he kicked a goal either. But, he's been out all year. I actually expected this sort of score last week in his first game back. So I'm not surprised that he had a down game. I think he'll bounce back. He'll be better for the run. And I think you should still be pretty optimistic if you grabbed him last week. So on to this week. Who are the 4 that I've got? It's an interesting group. And as I said, it is getting harder and harder to find these names. We are at the point of the year now where list management becomes a big part of it. Guys that you're grabbing, you're spending a waiver pick on. You've got to realistically be thinking, am I going to keep this guy when it's time to delist whenever it is for your league? Nonetheless, here's some guys that I think you could do with. Tom Brown for Richmond. I was at Richmond Adelaide a few weeks ago at the G and watched from level 1 up close. Good way to watch the footy. And I was really impressed with a couple of these young Richmond guys. And, I don't really know their numbers yet, so I had to check. One of them was Sam Banks, no surprise. But the other was Tom Brown, and I really liked his ball use in the back half. So nice to see him get a nice score on the weekend, 98, 99, I think it was. He's 39% owned across the leagues, and I don't think he'll necessarily score that again, but I do see him as another type that could play that role and can score that well, along with Banks and Short. Dylan Shield is still owned in 60% of leagues, but I reckon he'll be in this week, and I reckon he'll score pretty well playing in the midfield for the Bombers. So for the 40% of leagues where he's just sitting there, that's a great player you can just snap up, put in the back line that could hopefully take you to the promised land and get you that premiership. Sam Switkowski for Freo came back from an injury and, yeah, looked really good, had a good spark, added a real spark to the Dockers. His score wasn't amazing with I think it was 75, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like he's got some good scores in him to finish the year, and I think he could be pretty good pickup for you. And then the last one, Manny Liddy, is only 21% owned, and, you know, I just spoke about him. I really like the look of him, and I think I was wrong on this because he was omitted last week, but I do feel like he's establishing himself and will be in that side. Yeah, I think he's worth a crack. So they're my 4, but let's go even deeper and look at some very deep leagues, see what we can find. Jake Melksham, I mean, arguably could be in the regular section, but I've put him in this one because he's only 11% owned, which is funny. He's had 2 very good weeks and no one's buying it. But he's done it 3 weeks in a row now, playing Carlton this week. Who knows? Job Shanahan for West Coast, 18-year-old key forward. And, you know, West Coast have had a lot of those guys the last few years, but I don't know, there's something about this kid. It was his 3rd game on the weekend. He put up a 78 the week before against the Giants and only 53 on the weekend, but I don't know, he looks like he's been playing for a long time. Doesn't look like a kid, and the commentators talked about him, talking about how they've got a real good one there. Yeah, I don't know. He could just develop into something pretty handy. Max Heath for St Kilda. I mean, why not? If he's playing, and yeah, 16% owned, has the forward status, which is handy. But yes, well, he scored 49. Not terrible for a debut. See what he does this week, but I reckon he's worth a shout. And then the last spot I've given to all 3 of the possible Cherry replacements. So I'll run through them. Bryn Teakle, who I actually think is the most likely. He's currently owned in 1% of keeper and dynasty leagues, and he has forward status. Finbar Maley at 15% owned, and Callum Coleman-Jones at 5% owned. So I reckon whoever gets the ruck spot this week for North, that's the one I'm recommending. Not really helpful because on a Tuesday we're not going to know that, but yeah, I don't know. Go with Teakle. That'd be my gut feel. All right, we'll jump into the questions now and then wrap up the episode. If you're enjoying Finders Keepers, make sure you've liked, subscribed, wherever you're listening to it. And, you know, if you do feel so inclined, leave a 5-star review as well. That'd be pretty cool. But make sure you're following the X page as well, at FindKeepAFL, to keep up to date with the latest on the podcast. And that's where you can reach me and send your questions in. Your Keeper League or draft questions, as well as my favourite, sending me trades that have gone through in your league that I can read out on the pod and analyse for you. So speaking of which, let's get to it. We've got 3 great questions this week. Thank you to those who send them through. We start with Big Red on X at Mortar Ted. And he sent through a trade that went through and then a follow-up question as well. The trade that just went through between a finals contender and someone that's missing out. So the trade was to the finals contender. They got Max Gawn, Ryan Marrick and Dan Curtin. Oof. In exchange for Tom De Koning, Nick Vlosten and Dan Rioli. So for extra context, the side that's going to miss finals has Will Day, Hayden Young, so it's meant no midfield other than some waivers. Tried but fell short in 4 games by single-digit deficits. Oh, that's rough, Big Red. I reckon that's your team based on what you're saying. So you've missed finals, what are you going to do? So you've cashed in on Gawn and got Tom De Koning. I love that. I think that's really good. I think buying Tom De Koning now is the best time. Owners might be a bit frustrated or not sure on what's happening with his role at the moment. The opportunity to get Gawn, in a finals push, it makes a lot of sense. So let's look at it again. Gawn, Marek and Curtin for De Koning, Floston and Rioli. It's interesting. I mean, Curtin, I would have tried to hold on to Curtin very much so, but it's not too bad. And by the sounds of it, you're going to be hopefully contending next year. If you've got Will Day, Hayden Young, throw in Floston, Rioli, they're all pretty good servants, but De Koning's the main one there that I think you're going to be happy with. Just would have loved if you could have kept Curtin. I'm big on him. But overall, as a 3-for-3 trade, it's pretty fair and it's pretty win-win, as they say. The follow-up question was, is Riley O'Brien staying at the Crows? Well, it's a good question, and I don't know. But I know where it's at, and the Crows are pretty much saying to Rob, we're going to try and get a younger, better ruck. So contract holds with you, just have to wait until we've worked that out. And I think O'Brien's accepted that. So in simple terms, if the Crows get someone like Sam Draper, who they may, I think Riley O'Brien leaves, heads to Victoria, maybe even to a Geelong, who could do with him. He's a very good ruck. He doesn't get the credit that he probably should. But I wonder if moving to a Vic club, he'll start to get it. So I'm going to say he leaves. Yeah, I reckon he'll leave. I think the Crows have got to be cooking something. And yeah, if one comes in, he'll go out. Great question. Great trading. Thanks, Big Red. At Jamie Mott 44 on X. This is a great question. Really, really good time of the year to be asking it too. So he goes, looking for the next future fieldable ruckman to jump on. Conway and Moyle owners won't budge. Draper is interesting as a buy low, but what team does he end up at? I'm hearing Brisbane or Adelaide. And then the flow-on effect for other rucks like Brian. And then he also says Barnett, only 21 at West Coast, wondering when the Eagles unleash him. So it's something that every keeper coach should have on their radar at the back of their mind. Who's the next ruck? Because whether it be injury or form or age, it's always good to have your finger on the pulse and know who's coming up and grabbing them. So, look, Ned Moyle's the one, and obviously you've said the owner in your league won't budge on him, same as Conway, who I'm not as sold on. Just his body is just such a question mark. But Ned Moyle at Gold Coast, I'm really big on. I think he's the one. The second that Witts retires, Moyle becomes a fantasy ruck gun. Sam Draper as a buy low, I think, is an excellent move for a couple of reasons. He was sharing with Brian, and then he got one game solo after the Brian injury, Draper, and then he himself got injured. Now, I'm not certain on this, but I'm pretty sure Draper would hold forward status for next year. So wherever he ends up, he'll be the number one ruck, assuming he gets over his Achilles injury. So he'll be the number one ruck somewhere. He'll probably have forward status. And if you can buy him now, when he's, out for the season, his season average is low, he's never had a great averaging season, it's a great time to target someone like that. I think if he leaves, Nick Bryan becomes the man at Essendon. I've heard Goldstein might go on another year as backup, which is crazy. Just with how old Goldie is, but why not? But Nick Bryan coming back from a serious injury, I really like him for the future as well. And then the guys I've written down, Vigo Vicentini at Essendon, I thought he looked pretty good in the games he got this year, but he's still so young. You'd think it's Brian for a while first. Nick Madden is probably the one after Moyle, I'd say, at the Giants. Liked the way he looked when he got his few games recently. Now, the only issue with that is Kieran Briggs is pretty young, but I don't think the Giants have loved what they've seen from Briggs this year, and I wouldn't be surprised if Briggs found a new home before his career was out. So if that happened, you'd think that would accelerate Madden's rise to be the number one, and I actually think he's the one I'd be picking probably out of all these guys that, you know, you're looking at now. Barnett for the Eagles, you know, he's 21. They're gonna have to have a look at him soon. I don't think they're loving what Matt Flynn's producing. He's been injury prone as well, but Barnett's only 21. So there's a few names. Jamie, don't have the crystal ball, so I don't know for sure, but I'd be saying keep trying to get Moyle. And yes, definitely target Draper as a buy low. And then finally, Nick Madden would be the one of all those younger guys that I like the most. We're going to see a bit of a ruck merry-go-round in the trade period, I reckon. Talked about Draper maybe going to the Crows, Riley O'Brien heading to Victoria, Tom de Koning going to St Kilda if that happens. Then what does Rowan Marshall do? Does he stay and play as a bit of a forward, or does he go somewhere else? It's going to be lots of movement. I think the rucks are going to be a very, very interesting topic next pre-season, as well as they always are, let's be honest. Great question, Jamie. Good that you're thinking about your next ruck, because it's very important. And then lastly, at Hawkers Heroes, great supporter of the pod. Appreciate it, mate. He's just written, trade deadline in keeper this week, and I'm a non-contending team. Any trade strategies for maximising my hand for the next draft? It's a good question, and it's that time of year for many leagues, I'm sure. I've never played with a trade deadline. Not an in-season one anyway. What are we at? Approaching round 19. Yeah, so finals just around the corner. Look, if you're not contending, Hawker, you're in a great position, because what you're going to do now is look at your list, work out a couple of things. One, who are you not going to keep beyond delisting time? And two, who of the players that have value now are going to be of the same value next year? And players I'm talking about are guys who, might have forward status now, but will lose it next year. And then as a mid-only, all of a sudden their scoring isn't as good because he's not a forward anymore. And then you just want to go knock on the doors of the offices of all the coaches that are playing finals in your league. I think the best way to do it is the best way to get a trade going for a guy you just want to get rid of that's got value. A lot of people will go one-on-one and send trade offers or have one-on-one combos. I reckon if you've got a group chat and you've got a good name, and I'll try and think of a good example. Let's just say Matt Kennedy. Let's ignore his score on the weekend. But for argument's sake, you got a forward eligible player. He's 28. He's averaging 100. He's had a brilliant year. But next year he's mid-only. Maybe he doesn't fit the age profile of what you're trying to do. Go into your group chat and just say, hey guys, and reel off their names, the names of all the guys playing finals and girls. And say, hey, who wants Matt Kennedy? Let me know, because I'm getting rid of him, and see what they come up with. And you can almost get like an auction going, a bit of a bidding war, because even if there's players in that league who don't necessarily want Kennedy, or haven't looked at you and said, I might try and get Kennedy off Hawker, just seeing the group chat that other contenders for the flag might be getting him, it's almost like, well, I don't necessarily want him, but I know I don't want any of the other guys to have him. And that's where you get that extra interest and, hopefully a bidding war, and you can sell to the highest price. But that's what I'd be doing right now, with it coming up to the trade deadline. If you're out of finals and there's guys in it, I'm sure there'll be players on your list that you don't really need next year that can help others win. So that's how I'd be looking at that. The other thing too is draft picks. If you've identified now who your delistings are, surely some of them would be of value to someone else So rather than dropping them for nothing in a couple of months' time or whenever you do it, get creative. Look at your other teams, see what they need. So you might have a defender that you're going to drop. He's just, he's so-so. He's not really doing much for you. And then you might find a team who's just had a couple of injuries to their backman. This guy could be super handy for them. So, hey, throw us a draft pick. And, you just want to maximise the value for every player. If a player has value, you never want to delist them for nothing. Anyway, there's some thoughts on how to tackle that. And hopefully it made sense. And hopefully I can help you, Hawker. In fact, tell us what trades you get done in the next week, if any. Be great to hear what you've been able to pull off in that last week of trading. Thanks for the question. Really good questions this week. Really important issues that you need to be across, or you need to be maximising. How to trade, how to find the next best ruck, all those sorts of things should always be in your mind, especially at this point of the year as we, the end is in sight, isn't it? What are we up to? Round 19 this week. That is incredible. Make sure you enjoy the last few weeks of this season, because it's going to be over before we know it, and we will be wishing it was back. Well, I know I will. Although a break will be good. Anyway, that's it for this week on Finders Keepers. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you've got plenty out of it. And hopefully for coaches affected by the many injuries and suspensions, I've been able to help cover them. Or give ideas on how to cover them for the remaining weeks of the season. So that's it. Thanks for listening, and I will be back same time next week on the Tuesday to review round 19 of the fantasy season. But in the meantime, I'm Jordox. This has been Finders Keepers, and until next time, keep on keeping on.